The fire had fallen. The chariot had risen. The whirlwind had closed. And then there was silence. Not peace, not comfort. The kind of silence that settles after heaven has moved. The kind that lingers because something irreversible has happened. The air itself felt different. The Jordan River still flowed as it always had, unmoved, unchanged. The prophets still stood watching from a distance, uncertain what to say, unsure what came next. The sky was calm, almost indifferent, but Elijah was gone. No thunder followed him. No fire returned to the ground. No voice echoed from heaven to explain the moment. Only a mantle resting quietly on the earth. Elisha stood alone. Moments earlier, he had witnessed what no generation before him had seen. His master, the prophet of fire, carried away alive into glory. A man who confronted kings, shattered idols, and called down heaven had vanished before his eyes. Elisha had followed him for years, watched closely, listened carefully. He had asked for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. But asking is easy when the mentor is still beside you. Now the dust settled, and awe gave way to weight, responsibility. The power Elisha had prayed for was no longer a future hope. It was no longer theoretical. It had arrived, and it rested squarely on him. No more following, no more standing behind another voice, no more leaning on borrowed authority. And deep within him, a question rose, not poetic, not symbolic, raw, unfiltered, trembling. Where is the Lord God of Elijah? Elisha stepped forward and bent down. The mantle lay where it had fallen, worn and weathered, marked by years of wilderness, obedience, prayer, and confrontation. This was not ordinary cloth. It had struck rivers. It had stood before kings. It had represented heaven's authority resting on a man. As Elisha lifted it, the weight surprised him. Not because the fabric was heavy, but because the calling was. This mantle carried memory. It carried the prayers Elijah whispered when no one was watching. It carried loneliness, hunger, courage, and fire. It carried obedience that cost everything. Elisha was not just picking up cloth. He was picking up responsibility for people he had not yet met, miracles he had not yet seen, and opposition he had not yet faced. The mantle did not promise safety. It promised purpose. Behind him, the sons of the prophets watched in silence. They had followed Elijah. They had witnessed miracles from a distance. But they had not walked as closely with him as Elisha had. They whispered among themselves, "Could this man truly carry that spirit? Could anyone follow Elijah?" Elisha did not turn around. Some callings do not need explanation. They require obedience. He walked toward the Jordan River. The water flowed wide and strong before him, unmoved by memory. Moments earlier, Elijah had struck these waters and crossed on dry ground. But Elijah was gone. No voice instructed Elisha now. No mentor corrected his steps. No prophet whispered encouragement. Only the river, only the mantle, only faith. Elisha raised the cloak and cried out from the depths of his soul, "Where is the Lord God of Elijah?" He struck the water. For a moment, nothing happened. The river did not stir. The current did not slow. Silence returned. The watching prophets held their breath. If the waters did not move, everything would change. If the waters did not part, Elisha would have to live with the question forever. Had God truly called him? or had he only hoped he would? Faith does not always shout. Sometimes it waits. Then suddenly the waters split apart. The river opened to the right and to the left. Elisha crossed over on dry ground. The sons of the prophets bowed and said, "The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha." But Elisha understood something they did not. This miracle was not proof of arrival. It was confirmation of responsibility. When Elisha entered Jericho, the city appeared pleasant, well-built, well-placed. But beneath the surface, something was wrong. The water was poisoned. The land was barren. The people were suffering quietly. The elders approached him and said, "The city is good, but the water is bad." They were not asking for words. They were asking for help. Elisha asked for a new bowl and salt. Simple instructions, simple obedience. He went to the source of the water, not the symptom, and poured in the salt. Then he declared that the Lord had healed it, and the waters were healed, not partially, not temporarily, completely. As Elisha traveled on, mockers came out against him. They shouted insults and laughed openly. They were not mocking the man alone. They were mocking the authority behind him. Elisha turned, not in anger, not in pride, but in alignment with heaven. Judgment followed. The message was clear. This was not Elijah's shadow. This was God's servant. One day a woman came to Elisha in desperation. Her husband was dead. Creditors were coming to take her sons. Her future was collapsing. Elisha asked her, "What do you have in your house?" She answered honestly, "Nothing, except a small jar of oil." Elisha told her to borrow empty jars, not a few, shut the door, and begin to pour. She obeyed. The oil flowed, and flowed, and flowed. It did not stop until there were no vessels left. Her debt was paid. Her sons were saved. The double portion was not only for public miracles, it was for private desperation. In Shunem lived a woman who recognized Elisha as a holy man of God. She made room for him in her home, a small room, a table, a lamp. Because she made room for God's presence, her life was changed. Elisha promised her a son. The promise came to pass. Years later, the child collapsed and died suddenly. She laid him on the prophet's bed and went to find Elisha. When asked if all was well, she said, "It is well," not because she felt peace, but because she trusted God beyond the moment. Elisha returned, prayed, and life was restored. The double portion was confirmed again, not with fire, but with resurrection. The question Elisha asked at the Jordan was answered over a lifetime. Where is the Lord God of Elijah? He was still present, still powerful, still moving. God had not changed. He had simply placed the mantle on another willing servant. And that same question echoes today. Where is the God who heals? Where is the God who provides? Where is the God who restores? He is where he has always been. And if this story stirred your faith, subscribe to this channel. We share these stories not as history, but as living testimony. Share this with someone who needs to know that the God of Elijah still answers. And leave this declaration in the comments. The same God still answers.